Welcome to the deep dive. So, um, when you think about Generation X, you probably picture a very specific image, right?
Yeah, usually it's like independent, maybe a bit cynical.
Exactly. Maybe even kind of overlooked. That's the popular narrative anyway.
Hmm.
Well, today we're going to dive beneath that surface. We want to explore a fresher, maybe more nuanced perspective on this really pivotal generation.
Definitely. Our mission, you could say, is to uncover why Gen X might be seen as the unsung architects of the modern age.
Okay. Unsung architects. I like that.
Yeah, it's not just revisiting old stereotypes. We're actually aiming to challenge them with some surprising insights.
And reveal the contributions of Gen X that people often don't talk about.
Precisely. Offering a more multidimensional view that might just, change how you think about them.
So how are we going to do that?
Well, we'll unpack their story through a few crucial lenses. We'll look at the historical forces that really molded them,
Okay.
their unique psychological patterns, the specific economic realities they had to navigate, and also the cultural blind spots that have kind of kept their influence a bit hidden. We'll even connect it to a broader archetypal view.
Sounds comprehensive.
By the end of this deep dive, you should really see how Gen X's unique experiences have profoundly shaped the world we live in now.
Often without getting the public recognition they perhaps deserve.
Exactly. You'll gain a fresh understanding of this incredibly influential, yet pretty quietly impactful generation.
Okay, let's start digging in then. Historical forces. You mentioned the latchkey generation
Hmm.
label,
Hmm.
but you're saying that's just one piece of a much bigger, more complex puzzle.
It really is. I mean, yes, many did come home to empty houses, that's true. But the deeper context, the more profound thing, is that Gen X navigated a world where the traditional family unit was being profoundly redefined.
How so?
Well, they grew up witnessing the highest divorce rates in modern history. Family structures were just shifting around them at this unprecedented pace.
So it wasn't just about physical independence, being alone in the house. It was a bigger societal shift, creating this kind of vacuum.
Yeah, and what's really insightful is how these early experiences, the changing families, plus this rapid decline in traditional religious and civic life, too.
Right. That was happening concurrently.
It all fostered this deep-seated lack of institutional trust within Gen X.
Ah, okay.
And this skepticism. It showed up decades before it became, a more mainstream feeling with millennials and Gen Z.
So they sensed this fragility much earlier.
They really did. They saw traditional pillars seeming less reliable from a young age, and that fundamentally shaped their outlook.
That's a powerful distinction.
Yeah.
And then you layer on top of that this incredible duality, the whole Cold War anxiety thing colliding with the dawn of the tech revolution.
It's quite a mix, isn't it? They were literally living through nuclear war drills in the early 80s. Real existential dread.
Hard to imagine now.
Totally. And then picture this. Just a few years later, as teens or young adults, they're watching the Berlin Wall fall. Seemingly a whole new world order opening up.
Wow. Talk about whiplash.
Exactly. Profound geopolitical shifts happening right in front of them.
And while all that global drama was playing out, they were also like the first kids learning BASIC on Apple II.
The pioneers.
But still listening to music on cassettes, maybe making plans on landlines. It's this constant back and forth, right, between analog roots and this rapidly emerging digital future.
That constant oscillation, that push and pull, it fundamentally shaped their adaptability. They truly were the bridge generation in that sense.
Experiencing life before the internet, but then being among the first to really dive into it professionally.
Yeah, it gave them this unique, almost dual perspective on technology and society. Super valuable.
Okay, so that kind of turbulence, personal, global, technological, it also put Gen X in a very specific economic spot, didn't it?
Yeah.
You called it the middle child status after the post-WWII boom.
That's a good way to think about it. They hit the workforce right after that big economic heyday ended.
But crucially, this was before globalization and automation totally reshaped work like we see today.
Exactly. That timing put them in a really distinct economic position. Many found jobs that were way less secure than what their boomer parents or older siblings might have had.
Less corporate loyalty, fewer pensions, that kind of thing.
Right. But on the other hand, they mostly sidestepped the massive student debt crisis that really defined the millennials' entry into the workforce later on.
So a unique kind of squeeze.
It was a turbulent, uncertain time for them economically, a sort of quiet struggle for stability in a world that was visibly changing.
So yeah, not the golden age, but not the debt trap either. A very specific challenge that must have forged a certain resilience.
Definitely.
And that resilience, it leads us right into the psychological and social patterns we see with Gen X. That self-reliance, for instance. It's almost like armor.
It is. That reduced parental supervision, it undeniably bred independence. But the interesting nuance here is that it might have also led to a kind of subtle emotional austerity,
Meaning,
meaning they learned to handle things themselves, maybe process challenges more internally, without a big outward show of vulnerability. Sometimes that gets mistaken for detachment, you know?
right, and did this self-reliance, this emotional austerity, then influence their own parenting? Because Gen X parents often seem more hands-off.
That's a really key observation. They often did become the most hands-off parents, almost like a direct reaction against what they saw as boomer helicopter tendencies.
A conscious choice, maybe, to give their kids more freedom.
It seems like it. And what's fascinating now is seeing the pendulum swing back again, with millennials and Gen Z often adopting these much more hyper-involved parenting styles.
Yeah. It shows how generations react to each other, doesn't it?
It's this constant feedback loop, each generation trying to sort of course correct based on their own upbringing.
Okay, another key pattern. Their low-profile approach to success. People often say Gen X just doesn't market itself.
Yeah, and that's a really powerful distinction compared to other generations. Boomers, often define success very publicly: the house, the car, climbing the corporate ladder.
Very visible markers.
Right. And millennials, famously, have often turned success into a kind of personal brand curated online. Gen X took a markedly different path.
So if they weren't shouting about their achievements, what was their approach? Where did they put that energy?
They just tended to build stability, build impact quietly. They're out there leading companies, founding startups, really shaping tech and culture.
But behind the scenes.
Often, yeah, in foundational ways.
Yep.
Without demanding generational recognition for it. Think about early open source software developers. Many were Gen Xers just focused on making something useful, collaborative. Their contributions are huge, but they aren't yelling about it.
That makes so much sense why they feel overlooked sometimes.
Okay, what about the cynicism? That iconic irony-laden 90s vibe. Was it just cynicism? I think it was often a mask or maybe a protective layer for something deeper.
Like what?
Beneath that seemingly detached surface, there was often a real, sometimes guarded idealism about equality, authenticity, dismantling broken systems.
Interesting. What do you see that?
Look closely at grunge lyrics from that era, or the indie film movement happening then, or even that early internet utopianism, the idea that the web could be this truly democratic space.
Right, before it all got complicated.
Exactly. You see the strong desire for something better, something more genuine, more authentic.
So they dreamed of these more open democratic systems, wanting freedom from institutions.
Yeah.
Before big tech became, well, big tech and maybe a bit dystopian.
Precisely. They had this vision, this quiet hope for a more level playing field, even if they expressed it with a smirk or a layer of irony.
That underlying idealism, despite the cynical packaging, that's a key part of their makeup.
I think so, and it drove a lot of their innovation, actually.
Okay, let's shift to the economic realities again, the ones that often get completely missed. You mentioned they were the first generation to really face downsizing as a norm.
Yeah, this is really important. Those massive corporate layoffs in the 80s and 90s, they hit young Gen X workers hard, often right as they were starting out.
How did that compare to other generations?
Well, think about it. Boomers often had pensions, a sense of job security being the norm. Millennials came later and navigated the rise of the gig economy.
So Gen X got caught in the middle.
Yeah.
They got that first shock wave of globalization hitting the workforce.
Pretty much head on, the chaos of that first wave. And the impact was huge.
What did it do to their careers, their outlook?
It forced career adaptability on them long before that became a buzzword. They had to learn to pivot, to be resourceful, to accept that job security just wasn't a guarantee anymore.
Which must have been a radical shift from what their parents experienced.
Totally. Many were pushed into entrepreneurship or freelancing, not because it was cool, but out of sheer necessity.
That's a tough lesson to learn early on. Okay, another economic point. Housing luck versus retirement risk. You said many Gen Xers bought homes before the 2008 crash.
It's generally true, yeah. They often benefited from that timing, buying into markets before the huge run-up and subsequent crash, enjoying some nice price appreciation.
Sounds good, but there's a catch.
There's a big catch that often gets missed. Unlike many boomers who had those solid pension safety nets, those defined benefit plans,
Yeah.
many Gen Xers don't have that same security for retirement. They've relied much more on things like 401ks, personal savings, in a much more volatile market environment.
So looking ahead, what does that mean for them as they approach retirement age?
It leaves them potentially quite vulnerable, especially if Social Security weakens or if the markets hit a prolonged downturn. Their retirement reality could look very different.
Defined by less of a safety net, maybe?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Coupled with rising costs for healthcare, long-term care, it's a significant risk that quietly distinguishes them from the generation before.
And on the tech side, we absolutely have to give credit where it's due. Gen Xers were serious tech pioneers.
Undeniably, so many of those early programmers, web designers, IT pros, the people literally building the first iteration of the internet we know.
They were Gen X.
They were Gen X. They weren't just users. They were building the infrastructure, creating the early online experiences, often learning totally new skills on the fly because, well, there was no manual.
Debugging code, designing clunky interfaces, setting up servers.
Exactly. Foundational work.
But they also learned a crucial lesson the hard way with the dot-com crash, right?
Real
Early
fast.
2000s.
Oh, yeah. That hit them directly. Many saw their startups just evaporate, their stock options become worthless overnight.
Ouch.
It left a lasting mark. They saw firsthand that even world-changing tech revolutions don't automatically mean personal security or endless riches.
A sobering reminder.
It definitely reinforced that innate skepticism and pragmatism we talked about.
Okay, let's move on to cultural blind spots and their legacy. There's this idea of Gen X as the forgotten caregiving generation. What's that about?
This is a really crucial and often overlooked aspect of their near future. Gen X is hitting their 50s and 60s now,
Right.
and they're uniquely positioned statistically to be caring for both their aging boomer parents, who are living longer than ever,
Okay.
and potentially their adult Gen Z or younger millennial kids, who might be facing their own economic struggles, housing costs, student debt, precarious work.
Wow, so caught in the middle again. A sandwich generation on steroids almost.
Exactly. It's this incredibly challenging dual burden that could really define a huge chunk of their later lives, their retirement years.
How does that compare to other generations' experiences?
Well, it seems likely to define their retirement far more than it did for boomers, or perhaps will for millennials. Studies are already showing a big percentage of Gen X adults providing financial or caregiving help in both directions.
That's immense pressure.
It's huge. Time, money, emotional resources, all stretched thin, often without the same social safety nets their parents might have had. It's a major, under-discussed challenge.
And thinking back to the analog-digital bridge idea,
Hmm.
that gives them a really rare perspective now, doesn't it?
Absolutely. They're arguably the last generation to have vivid memories of life before the internet saturated everything.
But also the first to really embrace it professionally, build careers in it.
That dual experience gives them this unique critical viewpoint. They understand, later than anyone, what we risk losing as AI and digital life accelerate even further.
Like what, specifically?
Things like the value of focused offline interaction, the nuances of privacy that existed before constant connectivity, maybe even certain kinds of community. They're uniquely positioned to articulate what might be getting lost in translation.
The human cost of digital saturation. And finally, cultural innovation. You're saying Gen X gets seriously undercredited here.
Massively, almost shockingly so sometimes. Think about huge cultural shifts they drove. The whole indie film movement that changed cinema in the 90s.
Tarantino, Linklater, Kevin Smith.
All Gen X. They create a whole new film language.
Right.
Or alternative music, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Radiohead.
Change everything.
Globally.
Yeah.
And the foundations of early internet culture. Blogs, forums, those old bulletin board systems.
Gen X creations. Before social media as we know it.
Absolutely. These weren't small niche things. They were massive genre-defining shifts.
So the conclusion is they shaped so much of the creative landscape millennials and Gen Z grew up in.
But they rarely get the public credit. It's like that low-profile approach extends even to their cultural legacy.
Their influence is everywhere, but quiet.
Pervasive, yeah. Deeply woven into modern culture, but often just taken for granted or attributed elsewhere. They laid so much groundwork.
Okay, let's try and tie this all together with that archetypal view you mentioned. Strauss-Howe generational theory identifies Gen X as the nomad archetype.
That's right. And that archetype typically describes them as pragmatic, Very survival-oriented, inherently skeptical of grand narratives, big institutions.
Sounds familiar based on what we've discussed.
Exactly. Self-reliant, adaptable, focused on practical outcomes more than, say, idealistic pronouncements.
But you mentioned there's an underexplored side to this nomad thing. Not just skepticism, but maybe a quiet strength.
Yeah, what's really fascinating, I think, is how that pragmatism born from all those unique experiences we talked about has actually made them the quiet stabilizers.
How so? Stabilizers where?
In politics, in business, in culture,
Hmm.
especially as the boomers start to, fade from peak influence. Gen Xers are often not the ones seeking the spotlight,
Right.
but they're the ones quietly steering the ship through rough waters, keeping organizations running, bringing this grounded problem-solving approach. They're often ensuring things actually function without a lot of fanfare.
The essential practical force.
Kind of, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so we've really taken a deep dive today. It feels like we've uncovered a Generation X that's way more complex, more impactful, more pivotal than the usual stereotypes allow.
Mm.
Not just independent and cynical, but in many ways, these quiet architects,
I'm
building bridges, laying foundations for the world we're in now.
navigating huge shifts with that unique mix of skepticism and that underlying idealism we touched on.
Yeah, and you've hopefully seen how their unique history, their economic reality, their psychology, how it all shaped these incredible, often unacknowledged contributions. Technology, culture, society.
Their influence is subtly pervasive, definitely.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. As technology keeps accelerating, as new generations rise, what crucial lessons can we actually learn from Gen X's journey?
Yeah, lessons from them being that bridge between two worlds, but also that quiet stabilizing force.
Exactly. How might their specific blend of idealism and pragmatism, that desire for authenticity, mixed with a very grounded, roll-up-your-sleeves attitude, how might that continue to shape our future?
Even if it's from what looks like the sidelines, it's definitely something worth pondering as we navigate, whatever comes next.